Wednesday evening webinar, and we're going to cover week 4 and the topic 4. It's what organizational structure, what's it all about? So this is a really key piece of information that we can bring together to kind of really understand, the principles around management and how some of the tools that are there that we can use. So that's what that's all about. And before I get started, are there any questions at all that you would have? Okay, I'll remind you that the test is next week. It'll be at the time of the webinar, and I'm going to send out a notice to let you know. But one key thing that I think some people, especially the people that come on later on in the term, is that these weekly commentary PowerPoint presentations are marked up to help you focus on what to study on, and they are all under in Blackboard under topic 13 under weekly commentary. So if you go to the weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll find the up-to-date PowerPoint presentations, and I recommend that you go through them. The test number 1 will cover all topics 1 to 4 inclusive, and will be 50 multiple choice questions, and that will be in part of the notice. But really take heed of what these are, and then just a reminder to everybody, I'll just show you in some cases, you can see that I've highlighted or I've shown a little golden key, and those are key areas where you focus on. And how I want you to proceed with this is that you should have each topic slide deck that's available in the topics alongside of each commentary presentation for that topic, and then go through both of them. And my commentary PowerPoint presentation with the highlights and the keys should point you in the right direction to look and focus on those areas on the slide presentation that comes out of each topic. And then if there's not enough, then what you need to do is cover off the videos that Professor Power have created, and they're linked into each topic. And they're specific. They have a lot more detail on each one of those concepts. And then also, the course outline is on Blackboard under content, under the welcome and course outline folder, and go in there, and you'll see on the one page, most topics have related chapters that you can read from on the e-text of the Pearson Rebel course. So that's how you kind of cover that. And I'm going to show you in the slide, there are practice tests practice tests for each test. And so I'll show you where those are, but I want you to kind of understand that they're not the only thing to study, because they don't 100% represent what's in the test that you're going to take next week. So those are the kind of things that you need to think about. All right? Okay, so let's get started. And this topic is all about types of organizational structures. And what I could say in general is that, first of all, I keep telling you this all the time, is that form follows function. So depending on what you're doing, depending on who's doing what you're doing, how you're doing it, that's all function, and when you're doing it for that matter. And based on how you're doing it, then you organize structurally to be able to accommodate that. And what that means is, if you're in a different industry and a different business, your organizational structure will be unique to those conditions. And that's why on this first page, you'll see there's different types of organizational structures that I'm going to cover. Okay, so that's what's key, and that's what's driving.
We can't hear you.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize I was muted, so I'm going to start all over again. boy, I missed a lot here. So let me just start with this.
Just the last like 1 minute.
Oh, just the last 1 minute?
Gary?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Like at the end of every video, this lesson, you're posting the recorded lesson, right?
Yes. So you can either access these videos through the MS Teams. They're in the chat piece, but I do have a YouTube channel, and they're all allocated on that channel. And I guess what I'll do is you can just search it. You can just put RDP Gary Sarantola, and you'll find it on YouTube. But I'll put a link in. I put links in earlier. If you go to announcements, you'll see some of the links that I had put out already, and go to those links and then subscribe to the channel, and then you can get in all the time. Thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Okay, not sure why I mute sometimes, but thank you so much for letting me know that I was muted. So you caught the information I was giving you about the test and everything, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll get started. This is just every week that I want to kind of share some helpful hints, hopefully. And I came across this article in Inc., and it's only because I have certain articles that come to me on Flipboard, and I found this really interesting. And the whole crux of the article is don't type, write. Don't type, write. And that way, they've proven writing by hand carries some significant benefits over typing with the keyboard, especially when it comes to remembering and learning and understanding. And I placed the link to this article here, but that's really the message. I mean, if you read the article, that's what you're going to get out of it. And I tend to do writing, and as an engineer, I've been filling out these books for the last 30 years. I have a whole slew of them, and they're dated, and all my notes are in here. And I really find it helpful that I can remember, and I know exactly where I can go. If you type everything, you put it on a file. Every 2 years, most people change their personal computer or their device, and they lose all this stuff. And I find good old-fashioned records help, and yet they'll help me remember better and learn better and understand better. So I wanted to share that with you. All right, so that's your helpful hints, hopefully, for tonight. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the deliverables for week 4, and you can see that there's 3 Pearson Rebel surveys that you need to do this week, right? And again, just remember that these surveys are building blocks for the assignments that you're going to do. So it gives you information. And for some of you who went and did all the surveys that are required, make sure that you saved all that information because you're going to use it as building blocks for completing your assignments as well. And in topic 4, you can see that there are practice tests, but they're not your only study focus. Don't feel, and I'm speaking from experience from the last term, some of the students, just really focused on this, thinking, well, if they cover the practice test, they've covered it all, and they found that the test didn't really align 100% with these practice tests. But what it does for you, it gives you the type of questions, and it gives you a sense of how the material is going to be presented. So they're worthwhile doing, is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's those deliverables. What I wanted to tell you as well is that you're going to need to use your lockdown browser, and your webcam needs to be available on your machine. And there's 2 ways of finding out if it's working. So one is if you go to the bottom of topic 5, like the next section right to the back, you click on there and you do a test to make sure that everything's working. Now, when do you have to have this done by? At least a day or 2 before the test, because when you get into the test, it's going to be really hard to help you at that point. And all you got to remember is that if you do have a problem, the best thing that you can do is email me, because I'm going to be online, and let me know what's going on, that you can't get in, and you clear your cache and you reboot. And normally that solves just about any little problem that's associated with that. If your first time around using a lockdown browser, if you go to your Blackboard, And you can see in the navigational panel under here, I have Lockdown Browser 2023. And it gives you all the information about, you know, what you should have done to be able to be ready for, you know, for a particular test. And also this is where you find this particular note. You'll see I have the orange arrow, and especially if you have a Chromebook, I guess the system, you know, is not totally standard to deal with Chromebook. So there might be one or two things that are different, and that tells you, you know, what to be prepared for and how to, you know, how to make sure that you can access the, you know, the lockdown exams. So that's key if you have a Chromebook. And the last thing that can happen is that you show up for the test, you know, maybe just on time or whatever, and then you know, you run into these kind of issues. So any questions about, you know, doing the, you know, the test to make sure your lockdown browser and your webcam work? The thing is that it will show on Blackboard, but there's no marks related to it. Just so don't worry that, you know, if you don't answer the questions right on the test or whatever, you know, you don't have to worry about losing marks or anything. And there's two ways to go. One is to just do this practice test that's right in Blackboard, or you can actually look at the materials about the lockdown browser, and there's a short test that you can do there that's I think 4 questions, and that'll get you where you need to go. But either one works, okay? And if something doesn't work, especially before next Wednesday, please email me to make sure, you know, that I can get things going, and if I need IT support to help, you know, I'll do that. All right, so that's where that is. Okay, now the next thing is, you know, your Wk4 deliverables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cover what's needed, but you need to really, you know, we need to go through this this session so that you can see some of the things that you're being asked to provide. You know, you're going to learn about as well. So we don't know everything that you need to know to be able to do this like right now. Okay. So the first one, the first participation topic, 4A, and it's a group team exercise, and so is 4B. It's a group team exercise. So what you need to do is answer these questions that are right on, you know, right on that posting. And what it is that, you know, the first thing where it says identify one influence for good and one influence for bad, that's really the summary of these questions. So the first question is, what is the role of the vision mandate of the organization your group has chosen to describe beyond just producing and offering a, you know, a product or service? And the thing is, if you were specific in topic 3 to select a company, you use that. And if for some chance you weren't specific, I want you to really kind of don't just take a generic look at this. Pick a particular company, and in terms of, you know, where it's very specific, because when you do answer these questions, then it'll be a lot more meaningful, and it'll be a lot more help to help you use this in further assignments. Okay, so that's key. All right, so the second question is, and we know I mentioned this thing about triple bottom line, but triple bottom line is really people, planet, and prosperity or profit. And that's where companies have to, you know, from a corporate social responsibility point of view, that's where they have to worry about social impact of their business. They have to worry about environmental impact, and then they have to make money, because if they don't make money, they're not going to exist. All right. So from a triple bottom line point of view, how does your organization that you chose, and specifically, so if you're going to say, let's just say that you choose a heating and ventilating company. Well, I want you to look at one maybe on the internet, and maybe take a look at, like for Red Deer, you could look into Bruins Plumbing and Heating, and then you'll get a sense of the size of the organization and what it does, and that will help you. You know, if you pick something similar to that, it'll help you be a lot more specific, because it says, you know, from a triple bottom line point of view, how does this company contribute to social good? And then you provide an example, right? So let's just take TELUS, right? So TELUS is a telecommunications company. It's the 4th largest in Canada, and really they provide long distance, they provide telephone communication, they provide data transfer, mobile communication, everything else. All right, so that's their their product and services that they provide. But take a look at their tagline. Their tagline is the future is friendly, and take a look at their vision. And what that means is that they're looking beyond just the products and services that they're providing. So one of the societal goods is that they will reinforce communities, right? You can use their services as a community to do good things, like public forums, to be able to deal with public issues and those kind of things. So that's what what I'm looking for in question 2. And then question 3 is, using triple bottom line again, what is this company or organization? How does it hurt society? Well, if you take a look at maybe Campbell Soup, and they make soup, but if they're dumping all their refuse and the waste into the river, well, then they're polluting that river, and people downriver have contaminated drinking water. All right, so that's the example for the bad thing that they could do. The little piece in the bottom here, organizational analysis, is just to help you. You don't have to answer those questions or anything, but it may spur some thinking, and that's the only reason why this little piece is here. Right, so that's the first one. Now the second one, and I'm going to elaborate on this, but the main purpose of organizational structure is to drive behavior. That's really what you're trying to do. So you're trying to, and I've got a description in there that I'm going to cover off in the next slide or so, but it's essentially to give people the tools and give them the means and the conditions to be able to support the goals of the organization. So what that means is that each organization, because it's different, it has to be structured differently based on its mandate, based on the industry, and so that it's not just an easy, well, okay, let's just use one standard way of doing an organizational chart. And so so that you need to come up with that organizational chart, and then you need to talk about the org structure information for that business, and that's where you answer these questions. So let's go through with those. So one is, how will the work be divided into separate jobs? Well, in further slides, we're going to be talking about specialization. So you need to answer that question. What type of departments are there within the organization? And so what it is that there's different functions in terms of departments that are part of that organization. And so how is that going to come together for the organizational chart that you're going to provide for the company that you chose as a group? The next one is develop an organizational chart that shows line and staff authority and span of control. So basically, you've kind of done this in 4A, so that's all you need to do. You can just say C4A, but you need to see exhibit for 4A, but you need to understand that line and staff authority is basically the way that the structure allows for command, and we're going to talk about in the slides coming unity of command, which means that message goes right from the top and goes through the organization, so that's what the employees hear. So that's line and staff authority, because it's command and control. And then span of control, we're going to talk about in other slides. And span of control is, some managers have 2 or 3 reports. That's a narrow span. Maybe 2 reports is a narrow span. And some managers have maybe 10 reports. That's a large span. And normally what happens in smaller organizations, there aren't very many senior people in an organization. So what happens is that a particular manager may have a larger span of control in a smaller organization. It's not always the case, but pretty well, okay? So that's what that is. And then we're going to talk about, for question 4, what level of centralization does your organization have? And we're going to cover centralization versus decentralization. So what centralization really refers to is the decision making So it's centralized decision making. So on a very formalized structure, the people at the top are making the decisions for everybody in the organization, right down to how they satisfy the customer. And that's what centralization brings you. Versus decentralization, you may have a company like Procter & Gamble that has a division in every province, and so that there's some local decision making done there because of geography, and each geography is a little different, so that there's some uniqueness about the customer base that they're offering. So the management structure has a little more leeway on what conditions they can satisfy, and they operate a little differently than if it was all just one command and control operation where everybody was doing the same things the same way, right? And then you have to define the organizational structure for the group that you've chosen. What that means is, just let me go back to the other slide. Oh, I might get it this way. You can see that depending on the function of the organization, and I'll define that a little more. The structure is accommodated for, and again, I'll tell you again, form follows function, and so that you can see that there's different types of structures, for different types of organizations. So, for example, if we talk about Henry Mintzberg, he talks about a machine bureaucracy structure, and what a machine bureaucracy is. It's very bureaucratic, but it's an example would be the police service, and so what that means is there's a unity of command, right? Because there's a lot at risk and in terms of life and property, so it has to be done a certain way and executed immediately because of what's going on there. Versus if you have a group that just come together with an entrepreneur and they're building a game for an app, well, then you'd have a small organization with a horizontal flat structure. So in that question, I want you to pick the type of organizational structure and then identify it in question number 5. And then the last one is, what kind of facility layout will your organization need? And then if you want to provide a drawing for that, you may go ahead and do that. And the whole idea is that structure just doesn't end at how people are organized. It actually extends into how people work, in terms of workflow, in terms of how to do the right things right, and so that it focuses on giving the employees the capabilities and the tools and the conditions to be able to achieve the goals of the organization. So layout, and I'm going to show you a few slides as we go through this, is really important, in terms of accommodating that structure. So it's just another layer, onto organizational structure, and that's the way you look at it. And the whole idea, again, it's all because organizational structure, including layout, drives employee behavior, all right, to do the right things right, and to have the right mindset, to have the right approach to what the company believes is aligned with their core values. Okay, so that's that piece. So any questions at all about 4A and 4B? It looks a little bit onerous, but I'll guarantee you that when you get through that, you will have more information to be able to understand the concepts in this course and do well on the test, and actually then understand really what you need to do for some future assignments. So they're building blocks again. So you're going to get some returns on that. And what I suggest is keep your information when you do this. When you put the organizational chart together, use software to do that, whichever one you want to use, and keep that, because you'll likely have to kind of revise it. But now you've got all the materials to be able to understand what you can do to satisfy the future assignments. Okay, so how'd that go? I know I'm talking pretty fast here. I'm trying to make ground. Is that okay? Can I see some thumbs up? Am I being? Can you hear me in terms of understanding what I'm saying? Okay, good. All right, so let's go to the next step here. Okay, so here's some organizational chart examples. I'll try to explain them, in a different way here. So hierarchical structures is mainly to do with a mechanistic type of organization. So in those kind of examples, they're, police service, fire service, a hospital, because of the risk and of people, lives and property. So there has to be unity of command in most cases, all right, and in a real kind of strong approach to be able to do the right things right on, take a fire team that shows up at a local fire. The fire chief is not going to say, well, let's figure out what we're going to do here. Who feels that they want to do something? It's like you execute, right? So that's what hierarchical structures are all about. The next one is a functional structure. So when I talk about functions, so marketing is a function, operations is a function, accounting, that's a function. And most cases, functions translate themselves into departments. So in a smaller company, it would be the accounting department. In a larger company, it may be the accounting division, because they're looking after many strategic business units or whatever. But what functional structure is all about is that having the same disciplines together, and they have standards in those functions to be able to produce what they need to produce. So that's really a functional structure. The matrix structure really is a project structure, and what it is that you can see here is that these would be project managers. This would be a project, right? And let's just say, that Amazon wants to get into the furniture business. All right. So what they would do is from their engineering department, they would have an employee work as an engineering member of this team. And so what happens is that engineer, she reports to the person coming out of that department, and she reports to the project manager. And I know you've heard these things about you can't support two masters. So there's some issues around that. And I've worked in good projects, in matrix organizations, and bad ones. And sometimes when they work really, really well. And other times, because there's so much collaboration, across the various support departments, that you can really do well. In other cases, if there's some politics going on, so let's just say this was engineering, and this was finance, and this was marketing. If the heads of these organizations didn't get along, they'd want their mandate satisfied in this project, which could be detrimental to the project itself. So just to keep on with that, so you'd have a project manager for this. You'd have an engineer representing engineering. You'd have a finance person representing finance, and you'd have a marketing person representing marketing, right? And these three departments or divisions, whatever they are, would report to a CEO or something like that, a chief executive officer. So that's how the matrix structure works. And then a divisional structure. And divisional structure works differently based on, sometimes it's product line driven. So if you take a look at Procter & Gamble, they may have an office in each province, and the thing is, so let me back up. They may have several divisions, that Procter & Gamble. So they'll have house products, they'll have beauty products, they'll have health products, and inside of those, they're sort of like mini organizations. So that's a divisional structure. But take Caterpillar. Well, Caterpillar may have they have 5 different things that they sell. So their divisional structure will be geographical. So they'll have an office in Alberta, they'll have an office in Saskatchewan, they'll have an office in Manitoba and Ontario and so on and so forth, and that's from a geographical point of view. Then it could be just straight product, you know, so that you have a company that produces, you know, 10 different products, and they may have a divisional structure, you know, one for each of those products. So that's how that works. The next one is interesting, and this is an interesting structure that I'm sure that your cohort group is going to see more of because of you know, the increase in global trading, and because of the you know, the world is getting smaller, and there's sources of expertise and work services all around the world, so that you could have, say, 3M, you know, so the 3M company, you know, that runs that particular organization to make a new product, and they may have a contract organization outside of the company, and maybe has subcontractors, and that forms part of the network. And then they may have inside that company maybe, you know, a company that they own or whatever, that has a certain expertise that bringing to that offering, and so on and so forth. So it's network. And the thing about network organization is that there's a timeline to it. You know, you'll have a certain structure of network at the beginning because you're you know, formulating the project and starting to get to the point where you're past running a pilot and you want to do some manufacturing. And then as that, you know, as you sort of progress in the timeline of the company, or the life cycle of the company, that network structure will change to accommodate you know, the stages of development, right? So that's where that is. And then a team-based structure, and we know that in most teams now, the team leader, so that would be the team leader right here, you know, the team leader is not so much a manager, but an enabler, you know, and gets resources to the team, or negotiates certain conditions for the team, or brings resources, you know, and all those things. And what you will have is, you'll probably have some different disciplines that you need in that team to do whatever you're doing, you know, so it'll be structured more like a small company, all right, but it's a team. And then, you know, for the quintessential entrepreneur that starts off as one person and hires, you know, an employee and then a second employee, what you have is, you know, mainly what they call a horizontal flat structure. And so that entrepreneur or small company owner will have, you know, many people reporting to them, but basically have a input into every little thing that gets done, right? And that's what flat organizations are. And lo and behold, you can see now this is 5 people for one manager, so to speak. So again, that means the span of control is much more, you know, of a ratio. That's 5 to 1, you know, in a smaller company. And in a larger hierarchical, like here's the span of control right here, you know, is 2 to 1, right? You know, here's the span of control here is 3 to 1, right? So that's how to understand that piece. So that's the organizational chart examples. And again, it's all about what you need to put together, including, you know, a layout, like process and plant layout, as part of another layer of the organizational structure, to be able to manage the behavior of the employees so they can achieve their goals of the company. Okay, so here's some examples. And the reason why I just brought in this link of SmartDraw, I don't want you to buy the software or anything, but if you go to their information pieces, you can find out a lot of stuff and learn about it. So what is an organizational chart? These, you know, you click on them and they'll give you more information to help you figure out what you need to do, you know, how to make an organizational chart. 10 tips for the perfect org chart, you know, so there's really good information that they can provide for you. And maybe someday, you know, maybe you'll use this software because, you know, you're in the, you know, the management end of organizational development somewhere in some company, right? And here's what I'm looking for in terms of, you know, a chart that suits the business that you've chosen. And you can see here, they show the function and they show the person. What I'd like you to do is I want you to show the function and the position, okay? The actual position, right? Sorry, these are positions, but they don't show, yeah. What I want you to show is what's the function, like marketing, and then underneath that, manager of marketing, and then you might have, that reports to the manager of marketing is the marketing function, and then social media expert, all right? So, and then that's the way that you can show, the line of command, and then show, the span of control as well in the organization that you're going to do. I hope all this makes sense. I'm trying to, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm trying to make sure that, I cover off everything that you need to know, because next week's the test, and I want to make sure that I get through all this information. All right, so again, I'll remind you that I highlight things, and I highlight things that to help you focus on where to study, okay? And some of the things that I highlight on, you'll see one or two of these drawings, they look complicated, but I just want you to focus on what I highlighted, and maybe some of the writing that's in there, and I'll lead you through that. But what you really need to worry about, for the test, I guess, is, the impact of organizational structure on layout, because it's part of the same thing. And that's the connection that I want you to make. Now, here's one of those complicated drawings. I just want to, let you know that process design, is part of that layout. That's what drives the layout. I mean, that's the message I want to send. But here, if you take a look at, process versus, products, you can see in a bakery, well, a lot of what they do from a process operation is, batch operation. So when they make bread, they make a big pile of dough, like they call that the sponge, and then they work that sponge through where they can put it in pans and put it in, in an oven to bake the bread, and then all that stuff. So, but that's the batch part. But now when you get into the product of getting to the end product of bread, well, okay, so you've made one big sponge because you're going to make 600 bread, with that one big piece of dough. That's the batch part. But now you're going to take that, and it's going to go through a whole series of steps with that same product until you get a sliced bread in an actual bag. All right. So you can see that, once you've got into the step side of it, the product side, in a bakery, it's sort of medium quantity and medium variety. All right, so that's where that's going. That's all you got to know. So here's another drawing that looks really complicated, but again, the highlight is impact of organizational structure on layout, and I want you to pay attention to this. Layout should put together the people and the processes that collaborate the most. All right, so it's doing the right things right, most efficiently and effectively, and also layout encompasses the process, and encompasses out of the process come procedures, come standards, comes measurement. So that's all part that's driven by the structure, and you gotta put that together. All right, so here's another key thing that I want you to to know and distinguish is that what's a process layout versus the product layout. So here's some words to caption that. So process layout is where similar items are grouped together, and they're ideal for companies that perform custom work and where demand for each product is low. So let me show you an example of that. You can see, look at, there's a whole pile of table saws together. There's a tool room. There's a whole pile of drill presses. So that's what, there's similar items grouped together, and they're ideal for companies that perform custom work and where the demand for the product is low. Now, a product layout, that's like, producing vinegar or producing gasoline. It's where the equipment, the tools, the machines are located according to how a product is made. So if you're making vinegar, you start with raw product of an agricultural product, and in a chute that goes into a some sort of a cauldron, and then that goes down, and it's the same stuff. I mean, it's a series of steps to get you to the end product of creating vinegar. So here's an example now of a fixed position process layout. Is that, you know, an operating room? Well, you know, you can't be bringing that patient everywhere for a different procedure. It's all got to be done in one place. So there's some complicated factors, you know, in a fixed position process layout. You don't have to know these different pieces about it, but you need to know that, yeah, there is what's called a fixed position process layout. But here's the sort of the culmination of what I'm trying to get across to you, is that, you know, organizational structures, they're how job tasks are formally divided. You know, we're going to talk about specialization and whatnot. They're grouped and coordinated within an organization. You know, the organizational structure will help you do that, and then ultimately into the layout. And organizational design, that's the process of developing or changing an organization structure. But the structure piece is all about factors affecting organizational behavior. It's really, you know, in terms of workflow and employees, getting them to do what they need to do in an optimized way, in terms of, you know, better performance, being efficient, being effective. So that's what organizational structures do for you. And again, you know, I talked earlier about centralization. So the more that you can centralize, or that you need to centralize, you know, the more that you're shaping consistent behavior patterns, so that, you know, you can see, you know, when you're more centralized, you know, there's more betweenness. There's less closeness because the signal's going down the organization, and so that you need to understand that piece. So here's a good slide to really kind of capture what's going on. So what is an organizational structure? So it's the backbone of all the operating procedures and workflows at a company. You know, that's what configures everything to come together to do it properly. And then it allows, you know, to be clear, and it allows every team member to be involved, so everyone knows what they need to do and how they contribute, you know, to the developing of the service or the product offering. And again, the org structure, you know, it's dynamic, all right. And where you start is, you know, the business side. So the bigger the business, the more complex that structure is going to be. The smaller the business, you know, the more simple. And chances are, the smaller the business, when I talk about simple, you know, we're going to have a lot of a large span of control, right? And then the life cycle, so that as that business grows and brings on more products, say, or changes the way that it's satisfying the value proposition for the customer, that's going to change in structure, you know, to emphasize the key critical success factors of the business at that time in its life cycle. And then based on the goals. So here's an example about based on the goals. So you take a look at Amazon, right? And they want to be the premier provider of goods, you know, based on going into a platform and ordering and getting it through. So how do they maintain being, you know, a premium provider? How do they maintain that their competitive advantage? Well, they're looking at robotics and artificial intelligence just like everybody else. So look what they have in their structure. They got AWS, you know, you know, an artificial or basically an intelligence software company, and you know, that puts this all together for them. So their goals for their organization has created a need for that part of a different structure than other types of companies, or maybe even similar companies in the same industry, but don't have those futuristic goals, all right? And then the positioning. So the positioning is, you know, how you want to be seen, how you want your brand to be seen in the marketplace, so that you take a look at, okay, let's talk about TELUS. You know, TELUS is into health software knowledge support, you know, for data or whatever. And so they want to be seen as the trusted authority in that kind of service. So naturally, what they'll do is they'll put key experts in a structure to be able to support, that brand showing, and that's what they call positioning. So how they want to position themselves in the market really ultimately determines how they're going to structure to make sure that they're seen and they can do what they need to do in that area of business, right? So that's key. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is creative ways, to create sustainable solutions. and the key thing, I want you to kind of pay attention to this graph, in particular incubation. And what incubation is that, say that you want to create a sustainable way to make sure that a sewage treatment plant works properly. Well, they'll pilot a sewage treatment process in a lab, and that's where incubation takes place. So what they will do is they will keep some conditions constant so that they can prove that the relationship of what they want to do to improve the output of better effluent from that sewage process, they can prove that works. And then when it finally, that's the incubation process. When it finally works, that's the illumination part. Yeah, it works. And then, how does it work or whatever? And then what they'll do is they'll build a bigger pilot, and then they'll verify those parameters to make sure that it's working. But the incubation part, in terms of creating solutions and controlling the look or the observation of those relationships to make sure that they're working, that incubation part is key in the creative way to build sustainable solutions. And this is a piece that you're going to be part of, when you leave this organization. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk about, repeat myself again, where form follows function. And so the thing is that you want to build a building, but you don't even design that building until you figure out what you want to do in that building. Because if you build a building first, then you don't have things that can accommodate workflow. You don't have things that can accommodate information flow. You don't have things that will make it less costly to produce. And so that you really need to understand why, the what, the how, and in some cases the when about what you're doing, be it a service or a product. And then you go ahead and you design the structure to enable that process and that function. Okay, so here's how this breaks down. So I talked about the functional structure, divisional structure, matrix, team structure, network structure, hierarchical structure, and flat organization structure. So we talked about that. But inside of these, there's different elements of organizational structure. So inside of that is work specialization. So they just happen to be both number one, but it doesn't matter. So if you take a look at a function, of finance, well, naturally, those are people that specialize in finance. So in a finance function or a finance department, you'll find finance grads that know a lot about treasury and a lot about sourcing capital and a lot about interest and all those things. And that's a specific specialization. Now it doesn't automatically have to be in a so-called functional structure, but work specialization is a key economic concept, right? That's what provides comparative advantage for any kind of operation, which allows it to trade. All right, so that's key, and that's all I'll tell you about that. Departmentation, lends itself a lot to what kind of function departments make up in a functional structure, or just any kind of like a divisional structure, so that in a division structure, departmentation will have your standard human resources department and standard finance and your standard marketing, but then they may have geographical department for Eastern Canada, Central Canada, and Western Canada, right? So that's what departmentation does. And then we talked about chain of command, and you should really understand what chain of command is. Again, chain of command is that from the top, how does that get down to the employee at the at the line that's interfacing with the customer, or producing the product that goes to the customer, or producing the service that goes to the customer. So you gotta understand that the chain of command will be different based on a different structure. Okay, and then I talked about span of control a lot. The span of control will be different based on a different structure, and all those other things I talked about in terms of the life cycle, where that organization is, and those other components that I talked about in that previous slide. And then understanding centralization versus decentralization, and I've lived this piece in the power business, and I'll just give you a little example. Is that in the power business, I was a head office service, so I was a chemist that looked after the chemistry in all the power plants that they had in Alberta, and so that was the central function, and I was told specifically by head office, what I had to do, right? And in order to to have standards around the chemistry in each power plant, there needs to be a certain following of what's going on. But lo and behold, each power plant is different. It's in a different location. It has a different type of fuel. It has a different labor force, and so that the power plant managers manage slightly differently, and they're decentralized, because they're local and they need to be more sensitive or more flexible in terms of dealing with local conditions, right? But look what happens is that sometimes a power plant manager will get really powerful in the company and decide that, hey, we're not going to do chemistry the way the head office wants to do. We're going to do it our way. And you know what? We're going to hire our own chemist, and we're going to do it. And then that way, so costs go up, the standards change, and they may get into a situation that they don't have other expertise in case something goes wrong. So that this is always a conundrum in terms of how much centralization and how much decentralization. And based on the life cycle of the overall organization, sometimes it's better to have decentralization more than centralization, and other times it's not, because of world conditions where you need to hang on to control to make sure that the company survives. So those are the kind of things that you need to worry about. The next thing you need to worry about is formalization, so that when depending again on the industry, so the nuclear industry, you need a lot of formalization. You need a lot of redundancy. So where you design one pump in a normal power station, in a nuclear power plant, you have 3 pumps, right? And because there's 3 pumps and things have to be done, there's a lot more stringent ways of maintaining that pump, designing that pump. So there's more formalization based on the risk involved in the organization, and impossible, and where it is in its life cycle again. And normally, the larger companies have more formalization because of command that needs to be done to a particular standard to make sure that the brand is consistent, worldwide, say. You need more formalization and less formalization if you've got different operations that have to be so flexible, with the local, like healthcare in Africa would be much different than healthcare in Europe, so there'd be less formalization on overall global standards. Okay, so those are the kind of things that that you need to worry about. And again, I think, yeah, if there's a slide for it, I'm going to cover it. I'm going to cover unity of command as well. Okay, so again, you can see that there's a little yellow line here under departmentalization, so that you may want to read a little bit more about and study a little more about departmentalization so that you can answer some questions. So I talked about work specialization. So it's basically used to split projects into smaller work activities and assign digestible tasks to individual employees. And again, there's all kinds of advantages in terms of quality, because now that person becomes, a specialist in that key area. So is a lot more meticulous, and so because of that, because of the quality, there's less waste, there's less cost, so there's a lot of things that come to play. And that's really, how Henry Ford started the assembly line for automobiles. There was work specialization. So they had, some person just putting on the wheels, and other people, another person just putting on, putting the seats in the vehicle, and you get more done that way. And oh, by the way, specialization is the key fundamental for comparative advantage in economics. So look that up, and that'll tell you something. Okay, so the chain of command, it distributes the power, supports the knowledge sharing, and encourages employee accountability. So you can see here the chief executive officer, is the number one command person, and then has particular managers under them, and so that the command is going down to the line, and that's the chain of command, all the way down to a general manager that runs an operation out here, a company or a manufacturing facility or whatever. So that's what chain of command is all about. Now, unity of command is, Samantha only reports to Enrico, and Francesca only reports to Samantha. So that's unity of command, and as opposed to when I talked about the matrix organization, where most people in that matrix organization have two people that they are accountable to, and that's not unity of command, right? That's multiple operations. So again, there's a unity command, and you can see that one person only reports to another person, in that. Okay, span of control. I think I've talked a lot about that. So you can see that a narrow span of control. So the ratio here is 2 to 1, right? Of manager to employee, 2 direct reports to 1 manager, and the span of control here of a wider one is 5 to 1 in terms of direct reports to a manager. Okay, so that's how that works. So again, you see this little key. It's a reminder that the smaller the organization, in a flat organization is mainly flatter. Like a smaller organization is normally flatter than in larger organizations. And again, they have a higher ratio of span of control. So again, this one here is 6 to 1, right? Versus this here is 2 to 1. As you can see going through. Okay, so a lot of information to understand about that. So it comes down to the number of employees a manager can effectively manage. But in the last, let's say 20 years, span of control has really increased in terms of reports to 1 manager. Why? Because of software, right? If you have an enterprise resource planning type software, you have a real-time view of performance. You have a real-time view of goal completion. So you don't have to be face-to-face. You could have, a key general manager in Vancouver somewhere looking over, 30 specialists, throughout the provinces because they can see everything on a screen and they can get it done. You look at call centers. Call centers, their performance is measured by the software. Sometimes there are 50 customer service reps to 1 manager, right? In manufacturing, it's 40 production workers to 1 manager because the systems are there to be able to fill in what we call the white spots. the spaces in terms of what the manager can't see physically, the systems will report on, and they're able to manage effectively that way. Okay. So again, I talked about, the smaller the organization, the chances are that the span of control is wider, all right? But again, it's all about it comes down to this last point in this thing. It's the use of preferred management style of employees. So the answer is it depends, okay? And so if the management style meets the employee preferences and the conditions, so that's the appropriate span for efficiency and effectiveness. So the answer is it depends, right? But it comes down to preferred management style, because if you need a lot of centralization, and meeting standards, that means that your span of control is probably going to be a lot narrower than if like in an operation that is run by software or whatever, and that the quality standard there, it lends itself to a wider span of control for a manager. Okay, don't need to talk about that. I talked about formalization a lot, but again, formalization is not just the actual structure itself. It translates into layout. It translates into rules and procedures and standards, because ultimately what organizational structure is done is to manage employee behavior so they can do the right things for the organization and meet the goals. It's got nothing to do with disciplining employees. It's making sure that they've got the conditions to be able to do what they need to do, correctly and effectively. And formalization is low when you have unstructured problems. You need some employee autonomy. So what that means is, especially if you've got a development group that's developing a new product, a lot of it is trial and error. So people need the autonomy to creatively think and creatively try different options to see, what would work to optimize a process to manufacture something, or optimize a service that's a new service for clients, given artificial intelligence or something, right? So formalization depends as well. The more structure, the more formalization. The more unstructured the problem, the less formalization. And then the machine bureaucracy, or the machine, is it's bureaucratic, no doubt, because it's very formalized. But sometimes, and you should know about this, and in fact it's it's highlighted in yellow, you should know what mock bureaucracy is. So what it is that sometimes companies get pressured from the outside, and they're held to more bureaucratic operations because of the expectations. So here's an example, rules imposed by outsiders, and rarely enforced and often violated. No smoking in the mine, right? So no smoking in the mine is, it's imposed by the OHS, the Occupational Health Safety. It's forced by norms, in terms of we don't want people smoking like they used to, and it's dangerous. So that's a mock bureaucracy. It's not like the company saying you shall not smoke and that's the procedure. It's being forced on the outside, right? So that's the piece. The representative bureaucracy, well, union and management, they set the norms for working. It's not only management, it's a union as well. So they negotiate for safety and better equity of benefits and those kind of things. And then there's other bureaucratic pattern called punishment centered. So you penalize, somebody for not complying, with the rules of the organization. So one is mock, it's from the outside. The next one is representative. It's agreed to by all the stakeholders, the union and management. And then the other one is, if you don't follow the rules, you get penalized or you get fired. Right? Okay, so I wanted to kind of talk about McKinsey 7X and 7S framework, and the biggest reason for me is that I've used this for years and years, and it's the best framework that I've ever used to evaluate, the internals of an organization. So it's like my wheelhouse, or what I've done a lot is strategic planning, and you have environmental scanning. So that breaks up into two components. One is external environmental scanning. So you're looking at trends, you're looking at occurrences, that come up that could affect, your corporation strategy. But you need to go internally as well, and you need to see, is the company up for, the growth challenges that we're planning for? Does the company have, the attributes to be able to sustain, another 30 years of operation? And this McKinsey 7S framework is probably the best sort of systems approach to looking at an internal organization that I've ever worked with. And matter of fact, I've worked with people at McKinsey, using this as well, when I was working at TELUS. We consulted with McKinsey. And so what you have is you have the hard, you could see that they're all interrelated, but it all comes down to the core values of the organization that has an impact on that. The structure, we've talked about that up to now. The structure is really important to make sure you have the right structure to produce the right outcomes. But also, you need to take a look at the systems that you have that support that structure, that support the strategy, that support the style of management. So it's all interdependent, which means, it's a whole a system network that has to work together. And so I'll just define them. So strategy is the strategy of the organization. Structure, we talked about, all along now. The systems are like enterprise resource planning system, the accounting system, the PeopleSoft systems, the production systems that drive the machines. The shared values is the core values of the organization. The style, and relates to what we've been talking about now for the last 3 weeks, is the style of management. So that if you're in an entrepreneurial company that's innovative, well, you're going to need that entrepreneurial, go get them, curious style of management, and then staff is, the staff in terms of, do you have the right people in the right desks in the right operations, and are they trained, and all those things. And the skills relate more to competitive advantage than anything else. So when we talk about skills, we're talking about corporate skills, in terms of artificial intelligence skills, or system skills that AWS has in terms of putting IT process together, or skills in the key competencies that they need for TELUS, say, to support people in the health sector, right? So those are core competencies that relate to organizational skills that is so important. And so that's all I'll talk about there. Just a little bit about, you should just kind of take a look at what this STAR model is all about. And you can see that there's 4 areas of structure policy. So we talk about specialization. We talk about, the shape of the organization, the distribution of power, and then, how it gets set up into departments. So you might want to do a little research around that. I talked about formalization a lot. And this determines to which extent, business processes, policies, procedures, job descriptions, they're all standardized. And again, the more, the more centralized an organization is, the more of the business, requires standards and, for safety and everything else, the more formalization you're going to find, that supports that structure. Okay, I talked about centralization and decentralization. So this is a really good depiction right here. You can see that everything happens from head office. Everybody gets their direction, from one key group of decision makers. Where on the decentralized, you can see that you have, maybe in a sort of a division organization, you may have division offices that they do get a certain amount of overall corporate direction, but they have some flexibility to do what they need to do. And the thing is, especially in global operations, you need to have some centralization in terms of what the company has to do to maintain its strategic direction. But you need that flexibility and localized effect to be able to relate to the new market that you're going into. So there's always a yin and yang going on, in terms of what you need. So again, decentralization, the concept defining how managers as well as employees give input on company goals and strategy, while centralization, they have the ultimate control over decision-making process. And decentralization allows employees to impact the business decisions. So that's the key thing. So you should really kind of look into this piece here. Okay, so here's some examples that you can go through, and a big and long-term issue in business, especially if the organization is growing in scale and scope. There's it depends on where that organization is, that it may drift from centralization to decentralization, as it changes its characteristics to support the market, wherever it is in its life cycle. So that's key to know. Okay, so here's a bit on how decentralized should decision making be. So when it's important to have, so that you need to be responsive. So if you need to be responsive, then decentralization comes into play, because now you're reacting right at the customer level. And a lot of times it's short term. You need to do this like right now. When you're looking at reliability, well, now you start thinking about standards. And so centralization, and what do you need? Well, you need compliance. If you're looking at efficiency, chances are, if you have tight control on your production process, whether it be a product or a service, you're going to you're going to get your production cost or unit production cost down because of centralization. All right, and then this one here, perenity, means in the long term, you're gonna need centralization, but at some point in time, you have detachment, and what that means is the organization gets so big, then you gotta split it up because of economies of scale and scope that come into play. Because you can get to a point where an organization gets so large, you get into diseconomies of scale, and that's the time when you know that you got to split it up. Okay, so those are the things that you need to worry about. And again, if you take a look at this in terms of decision making, in a centralized operation, one body of management decides procedures and develops strategies, important, really important, during a crisis. And you'll see that if an organization is fighting bankruptcy, all of a sudden all the rules change, and you got to keep to some strict compliance to make sure that you're viable. So all of a sudden that's a crisis, and you'll see that the management structure will go to centralized operation. When things are going really well, and you know, the market is there for the taking, chances are, you know, it'll be decentralized to give power to those the factions that are, you know, in the markets that they're in, to be able to grow and whatever. So decision making is a big component. And again, importantly, if there's a crisis, you know, chances are you're gonna go back to a centralized approach. So again, let's talk about mechanistic versus an organic organization. So when I talk about mechanistic, I used Henry Mintzberg terms of machine bureaucracy. You know, it's rigid and tightly controlled. It's got high specialization, rigid departmentalization so that it's controlled really tight. It's got a clear chain of command, narrow span of control, very centralized, and high formalization. And why? Because in most of those cases, there's a lot of risk involved in terms of life or property, and it's got to be run, and it's got to be so focused on execution that you need that control, you need that specialization to make sure that you get to the right results. On the other side, an organic organization, and then if I use Henry Mintzberg's terms, an adhocracy, ad hoc, they're doing things on the fly, because they got to grow. So there's a lot of collaboration, vertical and horizontal. So there's a lot of two-way communication more two-way communication between an employee and a manager, because it's a smaller organization, it's less formal, and it's all about getting the job done. It's all about meeting that goal. And so there's adaptable duties, there's few rules, informal communication, and very decentralized, right? So those are the bookends. And then depending on the industry and the company and the customer base that you're serving, you'll find something in between to be able to satisfy the structure that will create the right behaviors to be successful, as a corporation or a business. So we talked about the different organizational structures, in that that flat organization. It's also known as a flatarchy, and the matrix. Employees work in multiple departments with multiple superiors, and there's some good stuff around that, and there's some not so good stuff. And then again, we talked about the 7 types of organizational structures. So functional structures, where there's a composition of similar disciplines or similar capabilities, and then that's to manage high standards, to manage good quality. And then divisional structures, like we talked about that, and that could be either product or could be geography driven, or it could be product line driven, or different packages of services. The matrix organization I talked about, team structure I talked about, the network structure is a structure that you need to really be thinking about, and then the hierarchical structure and the flat organization. So here's some examples of each one, right? And then you can see, like, even in types of departments, so functional, groups of employees based on work performed, engineering, accounting, and then product departments, groups, employees based on major product areas. Customer, groups of employees based on particular customer segments or target markets. Then geographic, and then process, groups of employees based on the basis of work of customer flow. Okay, so again, here's some, here's a view of Procter & Gamble in terms of departmentalization. You can see that, they, on here, it's basically product lines of, baby products and health products and beauty products and food, and then the standard services that are provided, for all of these different departments. Okay, there's an example of a matrix structure that I talked about, and you can see here, the chief executive officer has these departments in terms of, this might be residential and engineering, research, engineering, marketing, sales, manufacturing. So you would have one or two representatives from each one of these functions that comes together under a product manager, and then they will develop a new product, right? So again, the bottom line here, if you go after a matrix organizational structure, you'll need to find a way to avoid authority confusion and prevent conflicts between managers, okay? Because each one of these managers for these functions, you know, they're competing for resources and they're competing for agenda, and sometimes politics gets involved. Okay, so a lot more about the matrix structure. Here's a little more about the network structure, the flat organization. And the thing is too, is that understand, you know, in the lower levels of management, you know, in the line functions, this is really where it happens. I mean, this is where the customer gets supported. You know, it's the essential activities of the organization. And something you should know, and I think I mentioned it before, but you know, the research shows that the most trusted level of management in corporations in North America is the line level manager. So that you really need to provide these line managers, you know, the tools and the information that they need to maintain and build that trust, because that trust is what, you know, essentially leads to employee engagement and high levels of productivity and quality. Okay, so you know, so understand this line and staff authority. Line managers are responsible for essential activities. You know, they get the job done. The staff managers are supporting. So a staff manager would be like an HR manager that manages benefits, or an HR management that manages quality facilitators that go out and help production or other departments produce better performance. Know a little bit about Philip Selznick, and a little bit about where FAO plays in this organizational pyramid, and I think that's all we're going to cover on this one. Something you should know about, you know, outsourcing, and what else. And this is the last piece that I'll do. What outsourcing is that it all starts with organizations have core competencies, you know, and in the McKinsey 7S, you know, that was under the skills category. And these core competencies is really what contributes to competitive advantage. All right. So if something's not a core competency and the organization doesn't do that, do it very well or very efficiently, they'll go out and contract. So say that you know, they might need somebody to manage manage their raw materials. You know, so it's not something that's really, you know, core to, you know, any kind of technology. But there's a company out there that can do it cheaper and better. So what they'll do is they'll hire that company, and then they won't. That's called outsourcing. They don't need to worry about that inside, right? And so that's key, you know. And you don't hire just to hire. You know, you bring in what you need to do, but you never outsource your own core competence. And why? Because you're training somebody to compete with you in the future. So I'll leave you with that piece. And I think that's really all I'm going to cover tonight. But go over all these pieces and going from there. So the next time we'll be at the test, and I will be online with you on that test. So you can email me, and if you have any issues. But again, please test, you know, your lockdown browser and your webcam. Okay? Any questions at all?
Gary, question.
Yeah.
This coming next week, Wednesday, that will be our first quiz or first test.
So you're going to have to.
Next week will be our first quiz.
Yes, it will be your first quiz. I'm going to send out a notice about it. You know, you're going to do it online. You're going to access it through topic 5 and on Blackboard. And again, it'll the duration is 80 minutes. It'll self-submit after 80 minutes, 50 multiple choice questions. Does that kind of answer your question, Randall?
Yeah.
Okay. But again, I'll send a notice out, likely before the weekend. Anything else?
Last, Mr. Gary.
Okay.
Regarding our topic to submission, I just sent it via email because that link you provided was not available in the first place, and then it was just available, I think, 2 days back. But I already submitted our topic too, and I just want to confirm if you received that mail because I haven't heard from you back.
I thought I went through all my email. What I suggest is all the uploading should be available now. I think I've kind of got through all the glitches. So please try to do that because I've got a lot of administration, and the less email that I have to deal with, the better. I guess for both benefit for you and for me. But just try to upload it. If it doesn't upload properly, please email me, and then we'll solve the problem. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. All right. So watch your manage your sleep and manage your nutrition. It all helps in helping you do a good test. And when you look at all aspects of of what you need to do, it's not just studying hard. It's how you manage yourself and use your long-term memory and get into some good success routines. All right. So we'll talk to you later. We'll see you next week then. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.